Get out of my penthouse right now or I will have you fired before sunrise." Her voice was ice, her hands were shaking. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway of the most expensive apartment he had ever stepped foot in, mop still in his hand, and watched America's most powerful young CEO crumple against her kitchen island like a paper doll caught in the rain. He didn't move. Because he had seen that exact look before on his wife's face 3 days before she died. If this story already has your heart subscribed to our channel, drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from and follow every part until the very end. Let's see how far this story travels. The elevator doors opened at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Ethan Cole stepped out onto the 52nd floor carrying a mop bucket, a spray bottle of industrial cleaner, and the specific kind of exhaustion that only single fathers who work night shifts truly understand, the exhaustion that lives not in your muscles, but somewhere deeper, somewhere behind your sternum, where hope used to sit before life got complicated. He was 41 years old. His work boots had a crack along the left sole that let cold air in. His daughter Maya was 9, and she was asleep at his mother's apartment 6 blocks away, and the last thing she had said to him before he left for work was, "Daddy, don't forget tomorrow is show and tell, and I'm bringing your baseball trophy." He had smiled and kissed her forehead, and thought, that trophy is in a box somewhere I haven't opened in 4 years. These were the thoughts that kept Ethan company on the night shift. Small, ordinary thoughts. The kind that remind you that life is still happening, even when it feels like it stopped. He pushed his cart down the hallway toward the penthouse suite, the one that occupied the entire east wing of the 52nd floor, the one that belonged to Celeste Vaughn, CEO of Vertex Technologies. 34 years old, net worth estimated at $4.2 billion, and according to every magazine cover he had ever seen in the break room, the most powerful woman in American tech. Ethan had cleaned this hallway every Tuesday and Thursday night for 8 months. In 8 months, he had never once seen Celeste Vaughn in person. He had cleaned around her life the expensive shoes arranged perfectly near the door, the empty wine glasses left on the kitchen counter, the faint smell of something floral and expensive that clung to the throw pillows, but never the woman herself. The building supervisor had been very clear during orientation. The penthouse client values her privacy above everything. You clean, you leave, you do not interact, you do not linger, you do not ask questions. Are we understood? Ethan had understood. He needed this job. The health insurance alone was worth tolerating any instruction because Maya had asthma, and asthma medications were expensive, and Ethan had learned in the hardest possible way that when someone you love gets sick, money becomes the most brutal language in the world. He was 10 feet from the penthouse door when he stopped. The door was open. Door, not wide open. Just ajar. An inch, maybe 2. Enough to notice. Enough to see a thin sliver of warm light cutting across the hallway floor. Ethan stood there for a moment. His first thought was practical. Someone forgot to pull it shut all the way. His second thought was about his job, his supervisor's instructions, his daughter's health insurance. His third thought arrived with the sound. A cough. Not a polite cough. Not the kind of cough that interrupts a sentence and excuses itself. This was a wet cough, deep and wrenching, the kind that sounds like something tearing inside a person's chest. It came in waves, 3, 4, 5 rapid bursts, followed by a silence that was somehow worse than the coughing itself. Ethan's hand tightened on the mop handle. He knew that cough. He knew it the way you know a song that broke your heart instantly, viscerally, in the place in your body where memory lives instead of your mind. His wife Diana had coughed like that in the months before the diagnosis. She had explained it away every single time. A cold, allergies, dry air, stress. She had been so good at explaining it away that Ethan had let her because it was easier to believe her than to be afraid. And then, one Tuesday morning, she had coughed up blood in their bathroom sink, and by the following January, she was gone, and Ethan had spent the last 4 years trying to forgive himself for every moment he had chosen comfort over truth. He pushed the penthouse door open. The kitchen was all white marble and stainless steel, and the kind of aggressive minimalism that costs a fortune to achieve. The lights above the island were on bright and clinical, and in the middle of that brightness, Celeste Vaughn was on the floor. She was sitting with her back against the kitchen island, knees pulled to her chest, one hand pressed flat against her sternum. Her hair, dark, the kind of dark that photographs almost blue, was loose around her shoulders. She was wearing a white silk pajama top and gray lounge pants, and she looked nothing like the woman on the magazine covers. She looked like someone in pain, trying very hard not to show it. She looked up when she heard him come in, and for one fraction of a second, before her training kicked in and rearranged her expression, Ethan saw raw, unguarded terror on her face. Then the mask came down. "Get out of my penthouse right now," she said, her voice low and controlled and sharp as broken glass. "Or I will have you fired before sunrise." Ethan didn't move. "Ma'am," he said carefully. "Are you Ben?" "I am fine," she said. Each word was a door being slammed. "I dropped something. I was picking it up. This is a private residence, and you are not authorized to be in here. And if you do not leave in the next 10 seconds, I will call building security." Ethan looked at her hand still pressed against her chest. "You're pressing on your sternum," he said quietly. A pause, almost imperceptible. "Excuse me? Your hand. You're pressing it against your chest. People do that when something hurts there." He set his mop handle carefully against the wall. "My wife used to do it, right here." He touched his own chest just below the collarbone. "She said it helped the coughing, gave her something to push against." Celeste Vaughn stared at him. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. It felt like an hour. "You need to leave," she said, but the ice in her voice had changed texture. It was still cold, but now it was the kind of cold that comes from fear, not authority. "I heard you from the hallway," Ethan said. He didn't move closer. He just stood there, and he kept his voice the way he kept his voice when Maya woke up from nightmares, steady, low, honest. "That kind of cough doesn't come from dropping something. You don't know anything about me." "No, ma'am, I don't." He met her eyes. "But I know that cough. And I know what happens when someone who has that cough keeps telling people they're fine." Something shifted in her face. A fracture almost invisible, like a hairline crack in expensive porcelain. "What's your name?" she asked. Her voice was different now. Not softer exactly, but real, like she had taken off one layer of something. "Ethan. Ethan Cole. Ethan Cole." She repeated it like she was filing it somewhere. "How long have you worked in this building?" 8 months. "And in 8 months, has anyone ever told you that the people who work here are paid specifically to not do what you're doing right now?" "Yes, ma'am." And yet, he agreed. Another coughing episode hit her without warning. 5 hard, wrenching bursts that bent her forward, her hands slamming against her chest, her whole body tightening against the force of it. When it passed, she was paler, and her breath came in shallow, careful increments, like someone testing ice before trusting their weight to it. Ethan crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and crouched down in front of her. "Tell me where you keep your water," he said. She looked at him like no one had ever asked her a question that simple in years. "Cabinet above the refrigerator," she said. Her voice was quieter now. The authority was still there underneath, but something was sitting on top of it. Something tired. He got the water. He brought it back and held it out to her. She took it without looking at him, and she drank slowly, carefully, and he watched her breathe, watched her count the breaths. Actually, the way people do when breathing has become something they have to manage instead of something that just happens. "You're going to tell me this never happens," Ethan said. She lowered the glass. "It doesn't happen like this." "But it happens." A long pause. "I've been under a lot of stress. I'm sure you have." "The coughing is stress-related. My doctor—" "Has your doctor heard you cough like that in person?" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "That's not—" "Because there's a difference," Ethan said, between what a cough sounds like when you describe it to someone and what it sounds like when someone is actually in the room with you. He sat back on his heels. My wife described her cough to her doctor for about 6 months before he actually heard it. By then, we had lost a lot of time. Celeste looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. Not like he was staff. Not like he was an intrusion, but like he was a person who had just said something that landed somewhere important. "What happened to your wife?" she asked. Her voice was low. "Lung disease," Ethan said simply. "She was 37. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. "I'm sorry," Celeste said. "Thank you." He stood slowly and picked up the glass and set it on the counter above her head. She smoked for about 4 years in her 20s. Quit when we got married. We thought that was the end of it. He looked down at her. "How long have you smoked?" The temperature in the room dropped 15 degrees in an instant. Celeste's chin lifted. Her eyes narrowed. "I beg your pardon. I'm not judging you," Ethan said. "I'm asking because it matters. You are a janitor," she said, and the word was meant to cut, and he let it because he had been called worse, and because he could see underneath the cruelty, the fear that was driving it. "You clean my floors. You are not my doctor. You are not my family, and you are absolutely not entitled to ask me questions about my personal." "There's a nicotine patch on your left wrist," Ethan said quietly. She stopped. Her hand moved involuntarily, instinctively toward her left wrist, and then she caught herself, and her eyes went very still, and in that stillness, Ethan saw the thing she was actually afraid of. Not him, not being caught, not even the disease. She was afraid of what happened when someone knew. "You can fire me," he said. "You can call security right now and have me escorted out of the building, and I'll lose my job. And that would be a problem for me, I won't lie to you. But you'd still be sitting on that floor tomorrow night, and the night after. And one night you'd be sitting there, and nobody would hear you through the door." He picked up his mop handle from against the wall. He looked at her one more time. Her back was still against the kitchen island. Her hand had returned to her chest without her seeming to notice. "The door was open," he said. "I think maybe some part of you wanted someone to hear." He turned toward the door. "Ethan." He stopped. Her voice had lost everything practiced about it. It was just a voice now, a human voice. "Don't." She stopped. Started again. "Don't say anything. To anyone in this building. Please." He turned back to look at her. She wasn't looking at him, she was looking at the floor, which Ethan thought probably cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. "I'm not going to say anything," he said. "I mean it. My position if it got out that I was Ms. Vaughn?" He waited until she looked up. "I have a daughter who's 9 years old. She's asleep right now across town. Every decision I make in my life I make because of her." He held her gaze. "I'm not going to say anything. You have my word." She studied him for a long moment. Then she gave a single small nod. Ethan walked out of the penthouse. He pulled the door shut behind him, all the way shut, until he heard the latch catch, and stood in the hallway for a moment, his hand still on the door handle. His heart was hammering. He thought about Diana, about the 6 months of explanations, about the Tuesday morning and the bathroom sink, about the sound that cough had made wet, desperate tearing, and how he had heard that exact sound again tonight coming through a door left open on the 52nd floor. He picked up his mop bucket. He finished his shift, but when he got home at 3 a.m. and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before he touched it, he thought about a woman sitting alone on a white marble floor with her hand pressed against her chest, wearing a nicotine patch. She was pretending wasn't there, coughing in a way she was pretending wasn't serious. He thought about the look on her face in that fraction of a second before the mask came down, and he thought someone needs to tell her the truth before it's too late. He just hadn't decided yet whether that someone was going to be him. 2 nights later, he found the cigarette butts. He almost missed them. They were in the small brass tray on the balcony, the one that was supposed to hold decorative stones, and they had been pushed down beneath the stones with the specific, deliberate care of someone who had done this before and knew exactly how to hide the evidence. 7 of them. Crushed at different angles, different times. Not a one-night habit. A ritual. Ethan stood on the balcony in the cold and looked at them. And then he looked out at the city. 52 floors of city, all light and distance, and anonymous life. And he thought about what a person must feel like standing here alone at whatever hour, smoking in secret, believing that secrecy was the same thing as control. He was replacing the decorative stones when he heard her behind him. "You're not supposed to be on the balcony." He turned. Celeste Vaughn was standing in the balcony doorway, arms crossed, barefoot, and looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not angry exactly. More like braced. Like someone waiting for a blow. "The glass needed cleaning," he said. "The glass needed cleaning," she repeated flatly. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at the brass tray, then at him, then back at the tray. "You should know," she said, "that I have fired people for less." "I believe you. I've had the head of my legal department escorted from a board meeting for asking questions I didn't want answered." "That sounds like a difficult board meeting." Something moved across her face. Something that wasn't quite amusement, but was in the same neighborhood. She looked out at the city. "How many are there?" 7. 7. She was quiet for a moment. "I thought I was being careful." "You were being careful," Ethan said. "You were just doing it in a place where somebody was going to clean eventually." She looked at him, then really looked at him, the way she had the other night, that stripped-down look. "Why didn't you just throw them away and pretend you didn't see them?" "Because you'd just make more." "And your business is what exactly?" "My business," Ethan said, "is that I've been here 8 months, and in 8 months I have watched the oxygen concentrator in your master bath go from the hall closet to next to your bed. I've watched the inhalers multiply on your nightstand. And I've watched you leave notes to yourself on the refrigerator about breathing exercises." He looked at her steadily. "A woman who runs a $4 billion company doesn't write herself notes about breathing exercises unless breathing has become something she has to think about." Celeste Vaughn stared at him. "You've been paying attention," she said. And the way she said it, it wasn't an accusation. It was something closer to bewilderment. "I pay attention to everything," Ethan said. "It's how I've kept my daughter safe for the last 4 years without a partner." Another silence. The city hummed below them. "She doesn't have a mother," Celeste said. It wasn't a question. "No." "I'm sorry." "Thank you." Ethan picked up his cleaning cloth and turned back toward the glass door. "When's the last time you saw a pulmonologist, Ms. Vaughn? Not a general practitioner, a specialist." The silence that followed was long enough to be its own answer. "That's what I thought," Ethan said quietly. He went back inside to finish cleaning. Behind him, through the open balcony door, he heard her exhale, long, controlled, deliberate, the way people breathe when they're trying to keep something in. He recognized that sound too. It was the sound of someone who had been holding everything together for so long that they'd forgotten what it felt like to put something down. The third conversation happened at 2:15 in the morning, 12 days after the first night. Ethan was cleaning the hallway outside the penthouse when the door opened and Celeste Vaughn stepped out in her coat and her bare feet, and she looked at him and said without preamble, "My mother smoked. She died of emphysema when I was 19. Ethan stopped mopping. "I watched her for 3 years, Celeste continued. She was looking at the wall across from her apartment, not at him. She couldn't walk across the room without stopping. She needed oxygen to sleep. She lost 40 pounds in the last year." A pause. "I started smoking at 22. At a company retreat of all the stupid I don't even know why. Stress, probably. I told myself it was temporary." "They always do," Ethan said. "I quit 4 times. She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe. "The last time was 3 years ago. I lasted 14 months. "What happened at 14 months? She looked at him then. "The IPO. We were going public, and the board was fracturing, and I had investors pulling out in the same week that my VP of engineering quit, and I told myself just one. Just one to get through that night. And here I am. She looked at the brass tray which he could see through the open door. Do you know what it's like to know exactly what you're doing wrong and do it anyway? Ms. Vaughn, Ethan said, leaning on his mop. I have eaten gas station sushi at midnight because I didn't have time to cook. I understand making choices, you know, are bad. She blinked. And then, unexpectedly, she almost laughed. It was just a breath, just a small catch of air at the back of her throat. But it was the most human sound he had heard from her, and it changed her face completely. Gas station sushi, she said. The spicy tuna roll, he said gravely. I knew. I did it anyway. She looked at him for a long moment, this woman with $4 billion and bare feet in a hallway at 2 a.m. You're not what I expected, Ethan Cole. No, ma'am, he said. I don't imagine I am. She pulled her coat tighter. I have an early morning. She stepped back through the door, then stopped with her hand on the door frame. Without turning around. There are 3 more inhalers in the bathroom cabinet. Prescription. I haven't filled 2 of them. Ethan looked at her back. Fill them, he said. A pause. Yes, she said. I know. She went inside. The door closed. Ethan stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he picked up his mop and finished the floor and thought about the particular kind of courage it takes to stand in a doorway at 2 a.m. and tell the truth to the one person in your building who has no power over you. He thought it might be the bravest thing he'd seen in a long time. The filled prescriptions appeared on the kitchen counter 14 days after that hallway conversation. 3 orange bottles lined up in a row, perfectly parallel, the way someone arranges things when they're trying to prove to themselves that they're in control of something. Ethan noticed them on a Thursday night. He didn't say anything. He just cleaned around them carefully, and when he passed through the kitchen a second time, he moved them an inch to the left so he could wipe down the counter underneath, and then he moved them back exactly where they had been. He was halfway to the elevator when her voice came from the living room. You saw them. He turned. She was sitting on the couch with her laptop open and a phone pressed between her ear and her shoulder, and she was looking at him over the screen with that direct, unblinking gaze that he had started to recognize as her version of a question. Yes, ma'am, he said. Good. She turned back to her screen. Now leave me alone. I'm on a call. He almost smiled. Almost. He was back 2 nights later, and the bottles were gone from the counter. He found them on the nightstand. All 3 of them arranged next to the 2 he had already counted there. 5 inhalers. No longer a secret stash, a treatment plan. Small difference to an outside eye. Everything to someone who knew what he was looking for. He changed the detail in his own mind from she's hiding to she's trying. It was not a small shift. It mattered more than he would have known how to explain. Jashai. The night everything almost fell apart started ordinary. Ethan arrived at 11:30, took the elevator up, started with the hallway, worked his way to the service areas. The penthouse door was closed and dark underneath. She was traveling, he knew, a shareholder meeting in Chicago that had been all over the financial news. He had no reason to think about her. He had every reason to focus on the floors, the surfaces, the ordinary mechanical progress of a night shift. He was in the utility closet at the end of the hall when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. 312 area code. Chicago. He almost didn't answer it. Then he did. Ethan? Her voice was wrong immediately. Too controlled. The kind of controlled that is indistinguishable from frightened if you know what to listen for. I have a question. A medical question. I don't want to call my assistant because she'll tell the board. He leaned against the closet wall. What's happening? I'm at the hotel. I had a coughing episode during dinner. It lasted, 4 minutes, maybe longer. A pause. There was some blood. His stomach dropped. How much blood? He said carefully. Not a lot. Just some. He could hear her breathing, counting it. I need you to tell me this is normal. that it happens sometimes with chronic bronchitis, because that's what my GP called it. Chronic bronchitis, stress-related. He said, Celeste. He used her first name for the first time. He didn't plan it. It just happened because what she needed right now was not formality. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. A silence. All right. When did your GP last do imaging, X-ray, CT scan, anything? Another silence. This one longer. Celeste. He did a chest X-ray, she said quietly. 14 months ago. He said it showed some thickening. He said it was consistent with a smoking history. He said as long as I was using the inhalers and had quit. She stopped. I told him I had quit. There it was. You need to go to an ER tonight, Ethan said. Not tomorrow. Not when you get back to New York. Tonight. I have a shareholder presentation at 8 in the morning. I understand that. Ethan, if I walk into an emergency room, someone will see me. Someone will photograph it. This company's stock reacts to everything And if you collapse on that stage tomorrow morning, he said, what does it do to the stock then? The silence this time was different. Not resistance. Something breaking open. I'm scared, she said. Just that. 3 words without armor, without the CEO voice or the board meeting posture. Just a woman alone in a hotel room in Chicago who was 34 years old and scared in the dark. Something shifted in Ethan's chest. Not pity. Something more complicated. Something that had to do with a Tuesday morning 4 years ago and a bathroom sink and the specific agony of being too late. I know you are, he said. Go anyway. Being scared and going is the only kind of brave that actually counts. She went. She texted him at 2:47 a.m. They're admitting me overnight for observation. Imaging in the morning. Don't tell anyone. He texted back, I won't. Good. Then, he sat on an overturned mop bucket in a utility closet on the 52nd floor of a building in Manhattan and thought about the strange geometry of the world that a 9-year-old girl's father and a $4 billion CEO could end up connected by something as small and enormous as a cough. She came back from Chicago on a Saturday. He didn't see her until Tuesday. When he arrived at the penthouse floor that night, the door was open again deliberately. This time he could tell. Not ajar from forgetfulness. Wide open. An invitation. He knocked on the frame anyway. Come in, she called from somewhere inside. She was at the kitchen island with a glass of water and a folder thick with papers. Medical papers, he could tell from across the room, the kind with the particular dense text and letterhead that means a specialist has been involved. She was in a white shirt and her hair was up, and she looked exhausted in the particular way of someone who has recently been told true things they didn't want to hear. Sit down, she said. He raised his eyebrows. There were bar stools at the island. Ma'am, I'm on shift. Ethan, sit down. He sat. She pushed the folder across the counter without looking at him. He looked at it without opening it. What does it say? COPD, she said. Stage 2. Moderate airflow limitation. She picked up her water glass and set it down without drinking. The blood was from a small area of irritation in the bronchial lining. The ER doctor called it a warning sign. She paused. He used the word warning approximately 7 times in 20 minutes, so I assume he felt it was worth emphasizing. He was right. He also said... She stopped. Her jaw worked for a moment. He said the disease progression is consistent with someone who has been symptomatic for longer than they've been treated, which is a very polite medical way of saying that I waited too long. She looked at him then. How long have you known what? That it was serious. That it wasn't just stress or chronic bronchitis, or how long... Ethan was quiet for a moment. He owed her honesty. That had been the foundation of whatever this strange thing between them was. Honesty traded across a mop and a kitchen island and a late-night phone call from Chicago. The first night, he said. When I heard you through the door, that cough, you can't fake that. And the oxygen concentrator moving to the bedside and the inhalers. He shook his head. I didn't know the diagnosis, but I knew it was past the point where hoping it away was going to work. She nodded slowly. And you didn't say anything? I said plenty. You asked questions. That's different. She turned the water glass in her hands. If you had just walked in that first night and said you have a serious lung disease and you need to see a specialist, what do you think I would have done? Called security, he said. I would have had you blacklisted from every janitorial service in Manhattan, she said flatly. And then I would have gone back to telling myself it was stress. She set the glass down. People don't respond well to being told the truth by strangers. They respond to trusting someone first. Is that what you teach at Vertex? He asked. Build trust before you deliver the hard news. It's what the best engineers do, she said. You don't walk into a system and announce everything that's broken. You learn it first. You understand it. Then you tell it what it needs. He looked at her. That's what you think I was doing, learning your system. Weren't you? He thought about it honestly. About the cigarette butts and the brass tray. About the inhalers he had counted. About the breathing exercises on the refrigerator notes. About the specific quiet way he had paid attention over 8 months without ever intending to. Maybe, he said, or maybe I just couldn't watch someone else wait too long. Something crossed her face, fast, carefully hidden, but there. Tell me about your wife, she said. Not the medical part, the other part. Ethan was quiet for a moment. In 4 years, he had gotten very good at giving people the version of Diana's story. They wanted the brave version, the summary version, the version that had a clean shape and allowed people to nod sympathetically and feel like they understood. He'd given that version so many times, it had worn smooth like a stone handled too much. He didn't give Celeste that version. She was funnier than me, he said. That was the thing people always forgot when she got sick. They remembered her as the sick person, and she was the funniest person I ever knew. She did this thing where she'd wait until the most serious moment of an argument to say something completely absurd, just to watch me lose my train of thought. He looked at his hands on the counter. She was also stubborn in a way that I spent 11 years thinking was a flaw. I was wrong about that. The stubbornness was the same thing as the courage. You couldn't separate them. She didn't want help, Celeste said quietly. She didn't want to need it, he corrected. There's a difference. She wanted the world to keep going normally. She was afraid that the moment she admitted she was sick, everything would change how I looked at her, how she felt about herself, what Maya's life would become. He paused. And she wasn't wrong. Things did change. Just not in the way she was afraid of. How then? We stopped arguing about small things, he said. We started saying things we'd been meaning to say for years. Maya learned that her mother was brave before she learned what brave meant. He looked at Celeste directly. The hard part wasn't what changed. It was all the time before the time she spent pretending, and I spent letting her. That was the part I couldn't get back. Celeste was very still. I'm not Diana, she said finally. It wasn't defensive. It was careful. Like she was drawing a line she needed him to see. No, he said. You're not. I'm not in denial because I'm protecting someone I love. I'm in denial because I run a company with 9,000 employees, and if the market perceives that I know, Ethan said. That's real. I'm not dismissing it. Then what are you saying? I'm saying that stage 2 is not stage 4. I'm saying that what they caught in Chicago can be managed and slowed and possibly plateaued, but only if you stop smoking, actually stop and see a pulmonologist and do what they tell you. He held her gaze. And I'm saying that 9,000 employees need you functional in 10 years more than they need you invincible tomorrow. The silence that followed was long enough that Ethan thought he'd pushed too far. He was halfway to forming an apology in his head when she spoke. The smoking, she said. Her voice was different, stripped of the CEO register entirely. I've tried. You know I've tried. I know. It's not weakness. I want you to understand that. I know what you must think a woman with every resource in the world who can't manage to. I don't think it's weakness, Ethan said flatly. I think it's a physical addiction layered on top of anxiety, layered on top of grief. That's not a character flaw. That's a medical problem with a medical component. He paused. There are cessation programs that are actually supervised. Not patches and willpower. Real, supervised programs. She looked at him for a long moment. You researched it. I looked some things up, yes. Why? The question sat there, honest and undeflected. Because you're going to need more than someone pointing out the problem, he said. Anybody can point out a problem. What's harder is standing next to someone while they try to fix it. He stood pushing back the bar stool. And I figure if I've already come this far past my job description, I might as well go the whole way. For the first time since he had known her, Celeste Vaughn laughed. A real one startled out of her shoulders, lifting quickly pressed down, but unmistakable. The whole way, she repeated. You make it sound like a marathon. More like a long shift, he said. I'm used to those. She shook her head slowly. Ethan Cole. The way she said his name had changed over the weeks. It had started as a filing mechanism, a way to categorize him and become something else, something that acknowledged weight. What do you actually want out of this? The question surprised him. Not because it was inappropriate, but because no one had asked him that. Not in this context, not in any context really, for a long time. I want you to still be here in 5 years, he said. That's it. I don't want anything from you. She looked at him for a long time. That might be the most uncomplicated thing anyone has said to me in my entire adult life. I've heard your world is complicated, he said. I'm a janitor. My world is mostly soap and water and getting Maya to school on time. I find uncomplicated useful. She nodded once. Then she picked up the folder and closed it and pushed it to the side of the counter. And she picked up her phone, and she pulled up a number she'd apparently already looked up, and she looked at him one more time. The pulmonologist, she said. They have a cancellation slot on Thursday at noon. Ethan waited. I made the appointment in Chicago, she said. I just hadn't told anyone. She set the phone face down on the counter. You're the only person who knows. He looked at her. This woman who had built $4 billion out of intellect and nerve, and the specific, terrifying kind of ambition that doesn't apologize for itself. Who had stood on balconies in the dark and smoked in secret and written breathing exercises on her own refrigerator and called a janitor from a hotel room in Chicago because she had nobody else she trusted with the true version of her life. Thursday at noon, he said. Good. He picked up his cleaning supplies. He started toward the door. He had 3 more units to clean before his shift ended, and Maya would be awake in 5 hours expecting breakfast and the baseball trophy she still wanted for show and tell. Ethan? He stopped. The trophy, she said. He turned around slowly. She was looking at her phone screen, not at him. You mentioned a baseball trophy once, in the hallway. You said it was in a box somewhere you hadn't opened. She glanced up. That's been 4 years. Maybe it's time to open the box. He stood with his hand on the door frame. Maybe, he said. He walked out into the hallway, and the door closed behind him, and he stood there for just a moment in the particular quiet of 2 a.m. on the 52nd floor, where the city was far below, and the air was clean and cold, and there was no sound except his own breathing. He thought about a box in his closet that he had been walking past for 4 years. He thought about a 9-year-old girl who wanted to show her class who her father was. He thought about the way courage works, how it almost never arrives as a single dramatic moment, how it mostly shows up as a series of small inconvenient choices made in hallways and closets and hotel rooms in the dark. He started down the hallway toward the elevator. By the time he reached it, he had already decided Thursday night when Maya was asleep, he was going to open that box. Thursday came and went, and Ethan didn't ask her about the appointment. He had learned through Diana, through 4 years of solo parenting, through 8 months of navigating the 52nd floor, that asking someone how a hard thing went is sometimes the wrong move. Sometimes you have to let them come to it. You have to make yourself available, without making yourself a pressure. So he cleaned. He came on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and he cleaned the penthouse with the same quiet efficiency he always had, and he paid attention the way he always did, and he waited. The signs were subtle. The brass tray on the balcony stayed empty for 11 straight days. He checked, not obviously just as part of the routine, the way you check on something you care about without wanting to make a production of caring. The inhalers on the nightstand were being used. He could tell by the position of the dosage counters, numbers ticking down at a rate that meant she was actually following a schedule. A new prescription appeared, a small box with a pulmonologist's name on the pharmacy label, and instructions he didn't read because they weren't his to read. She was doing it. Quietly, privately, stubbornly, the stubbornness that was the same thing as courage, she was doing it. He opened the box that Thursday night. The one in his closet. He sat on the edge of his bed after Maya was asleep, and he pulled the tape back, and he looked at what was inside a baseball trophy from a men's league he'd played in when he and Diana were first married. A photograph of the two of them at Coney Island, with sunburned noses and bad hair, and the specific happiness of people who don't know yet how much they have to lose. 2 of Diana's rings, that he hadn't known what to do with a birthday card Maya had made for him the first year, age 5, with crayon letters so big they only fit 4 words per page. He sat with all of it for a long time. Not crying past the crying phase mostly, or at least past the phase where it arrived without warning. Just sitting with it. Acknowledging the weight of it. The way a physical therapist will press on a bruise, not to cause pain, but to confirm that the healing is real. He put the trophy on the kitchen counter where Maya would see it in the morning. He put Diana's rings in his own drawer instead of the box. He kept the photograph. He threw away the tape. The call came on a Wednesday night, his night off at 10:22 p.m. Not from Celeste. From a number he didn't recognize, a Manhattan exchange, and when he answered it, the voice on the other end was clipped and female, and aggressively professional. "Is this Ethan Cole?" "This is Priya Anand. I'm the executive assistant to Celeste Vaughn. Ms. Vaughn asked me to contact you." Ethan sat up straighter on his couch. Maya was in bed. The apartment was quiet. "Is she all right?" A pause, just a half second, but he caught it. "She's had an episode. She's at New York Presbyterian. She asked that I call you." Another pause, smaller, like the assistant was deciding something. "She asked that I call only you." He was in a cab 7 minutes later. Bye. The waiting room was the specific kind of awful that all hospital waiting rooms are, the fluorescent sameness of them. The magazines from 4 months ago, the smell that isn't quite antiseptic and isn't quite anything else. Priya Anand met him at the entrance, small, precise in a blazer, at 11 p.m., with the look of someone who had been managing crises so long that crisis had become her resting state. "She's stable," Priya said before he could ask. "She collapsed in the lobby of her building around 9. Security called an ambulance. She was conscious the whole time." She paused. "She wouldn't let them call anyone from her family or her board. She asked for you by name." Ethan absorbed this. What did the doctors say? COPD exacerbation, triggered by, they think, a respiratory infection on top of the existing condition. They're treating it. She'll likely be here 2 days minimum. Priya looked at him with an expression that was carefully neutral, in the way of someone who has a great many opinions. They are professionally obligated not to share. "I've worked for Celeste for 4 years. She doesn't ask for people. She manages people. She deploys people." The careful neutral held. "She asked for you." Ethan nodded. "Can I see her?" She said, and I'm quoting directly, "Tell him he doesn't have to come, but if he does, tell him to stop being polite about it and just come in." He almost smiled. Room number. Sound. She looked smaller in the hospital bed. Not weak Celeste Vaughn would have looked formidable in a hurricane, but smaller the way people look when the architecture of their normal life has been removed, and you see just the person without the boardrooms and the penthouse and the $4 billion gravitational field. She had a nasal cannula delivering oxygen and IV in her left arm, and she was sitting up at precisely the angle of someone who refused to be seen lying flat. "You came," she said. "You asked?" he said. "I said you didn't have to." You also said not to be polite about it. He pulled a chair to the side of her bed and sat. So here I am, being impolite. Something crossed her face that almost laugh quickly managed. The lobby, she said, of my own building, in front of the night security team and 2 residents who were just coming in. She looked at the ceiling. Do you know how many NDAs I'm going to have to issue in the morning? Is that what you're worried about right now? It's easier to worry about NDAs than about... She stopped. Her hand moved to the nasal cannula, adjusting it unnecessarily. The pulmonologist called it a significant exacerbation. He used the word significant the way your ER doctor used the word warning, like repetition was going to accomplish what volume couldn't. What else did he say? She was quiet for a moment, long enough that Ethan knew what was coming was real and unfiltered, and he braced for it the way you brace for something you've been half expecting. He said if I had come in 6 months later, if the diagnosis had been another 6 months, we'd be having a different conversation. She said it flat, factual, like reading from a report. He said stage 2 is manageable. He also said stage 2 is the last stage that's genuinely manageable, without significant quality of life impact, and that I am at the far end of stage 2. She looked at him then. You knew it was serious. From the first night, you knew. I knew it was serious, he said carefully. I didn't know the stage. But you knew it was past the point of hoping away. Yes. She nodded, took a measured breath. Why didn't you push harder in the beginning? You asked questions, you made observations, but you never just said it directly. Celeste, you need to see a doctor right now tonight. It was a fair question. He had asked himself the same thing. Because you would have shut down completely, he said. You know that. You know how you respond to direct pressure. I respond to it by winning, she said. You respond to it by going to war, he corrected. And when you're in a war, you can't also be honest with yourself at the same time. You'd have fired me and found a way to explain away every symptom for another year. He leaned forward, slightly elbows on his knees. I needed you to trust me before the truth was useful. That took time. She looked at him for a long moment. The board, she said. Ethan, I have to tell the board something. When I'm discharged, when I return to Celeste. She stopped. You're in a hospital bed with oxygen in your nose, he said. The board can wait 48 hours. A beat, 2. The monitoring equipment beeped steadily between them. Nobody talks to me like that, she said. I know, he said. You should probably add it to the job requirements for someone. The almost laugh again, and this time it went slightly further. A real sound, brief and surprised. It changed the whole temperature of the room. She pressed her lips together to contain it, which only made it more visible. You are the strangest professional relationship I have ever had, she said. I'm your janitor, he said. It was always going to be strange. She settled back against the pillow, not fully back, not flat, but a degree or two toward it. A degree or two toward letting the bed do what it was there for. Tell me something, she said. Not about medicine, not about me. Tell me something about your life. He thought about it. Maya's show and tell was today. The trophy. The trophy. He nodded. She told her class her dad played baseball before she was born, and that her mom used to come to every game, and that the trophy still counts, even though mom's gone, because the winning happened when it happened. The room was very quiet. 9 years old, Celeste said. 9 years old, he confirmed. She sounds like someone who's going to be completely unstoppable. She already is, he said. She terrifies me on a daily basis. Celeste looked at him. That direct, unblinking look that he had learned over these weeks was not challenge, but assessment. She was a woman who looked at things directly because she needed to understand them, and what she was trying to understand. Right now, he thought was something she didn't have the vocabulary for yet. Something about what it looked like when a person loved someone without an agenda. When they showed up not because of what they'd get, but because of who they were. Can I tell you something? She said. Her voice was different. Not the CEO register, Not the carefully managed version, the real one. The 2 a.m. hallway version. Of course, he said. I don't know how to do this, she said. I don't know how to be sick. I've been managing this perception for 2 years, and before that, I was managing a different perception, and before that. She paused. I built this company on the idea that I was exceptional. Not better than other people exactly, but capable of things other people couldn't sustain. I worked when I was sick. I presented when I was exhausted. I negotiated when I was grieving. She looked at her IV arm. And somewhere in there, I stopped knowing the difference between what I was capable of and what I was just enduring. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. He had learned with Diana, with Maya, with everyone who had ever said something true to him in the small hours that the most important thing you can do when someone is telling you their real thing is not to fill the space. My mother used to say, Celeste continued, that I didn't know how to be small, even as a kid. I couldn't just sit in a room. I had to be the reason everyone in the room was paying attention. She paused. I thought she meant it as a compliment. Maybe she did, Ethan said. Maybe. She looked at the ceiling again. Or maybe she saw it as a warning and didn't know how to say it that way. Her hand moved to the nasal cannula again. Needing oxygen. Having to think about breathing. Do you know how humiliating that feels to someone who's spent 15 years telling herself that she could outwork, outthink, outlast anything? Yes, Ethan said. I do know. She looked at him sharply. Diana. Diana, he confirmed. She said almost exactly the same thing, in different words. He leaned back in the chair. You want to know what I told her? Tell me. I told her that the strongest people I'd ever known weren't the ones who needed nothing. They were the ones who could figure out what they needed and ask for it without apologizing. He paused. She told me that sounded like a motivational poster. It does a little, Celeste said. She wasn't wrong. He met her eyes. But it's also true. A silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, not empty, but the kind that happens when two people have said enough real things that they can rest in each other's company without performing. The monitoring equipment kept its steady rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, something beeped twice and stopped. Then Celeste said very quietly, I want to keep going. I want to be here, not just to run Vertex. I want to be here the way you're here, for something that matters outside of quarterly earnings. She stopped. Her throat moved. That's not a revelation? Ethan said gently. That's you catching up to what you already knew. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had shifted, not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies, but in the small, real way that things shift when a person stops fighting a particular battle. I'm going to call my doctor in the morning, she said. The pulmonologist. I'm going to tell him everything. The actual smoking history, not the sanitized version. She paused. And I'm going to tell my chief of staff that I have a chronic condition that's being managed. Not the board, not the press, just Sanjay, so that someone in the building actually knows. That's good, Ethan said. And I want to look into the cessation program. The supervised one, the one you mentioned. I can send you the information. You already have it ready, don't you? I looked it up 2 weeks ago, he admitted. She shook her head slowly. You are... She stopped. Started again. Ethan, why are you doing this genuinely? Not the polite answer, the real one. The real one. He sat with it for a moment, because she deserved the actual answer, not the reflex. Because I was too late once, he said, and because being too late changes you. It puts something in you that doesn't go away. He looked at her steadily. And because you left your door open that first night. Maybe by accident, maybe not. But someone needed to walk through it, and I was the one in the hallway. He paused. I don't think that was an accident either. She held his gaze for a long time. Then she said, Go home, Ethan. Your daughter needs you there in the morning. I'll come back Thursday, he said, standing. I'll probably be discharged by Thursday. Then I'll see you Thursday night when I clean your floor. Same as always, she said. Same as always, he agreed. He walked out of the room and down the corridor toward the elevator, and behind him, in a hospital room on the 7th floor. Celeste Vaughn reached over to the table beside her bed and picked up her phone and opened her contacts and found the name of her pulmonologist and held the phone in both hands and thought about a 9-year-old girl who said the winning happened when it happened, and for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, she let herself cry. Not the managed kind, not the kind you do in private to release pressure so you can function better in public. The real kind. The kind that comes when you have been carrying something alone for so long that the moment someone helps you set it down, your whole body remembers the weight of it. She cried for about 4 minutes. Then she wiped her face, straightened the thin hospital blanket across her lap, and typed a text to Priya. Schedule a full team health review for Q1. Policy change. We're adding mental health coverage and smoking cessation support to the employee benefits package. Priya responded in 40 seconds. It's midnight. Celeste typed back, I know. Do it anyway. She set the phone down and closed her eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, she let the silence be quiet instead of filling it with the next problem to solve. Down the corridor, the elevator doors closed on Ethan Cole, who stood inside it with his eyes forward and his hands loose at his sides, and thought about a box he had opened and a photograph he had kept, and a woman who was for the first time letting someone stand next to her while the hard thing happened. The elevator descended. Outside New York kept going, all its noise and light and compressed human life, all its emergencies and ordinary moments and everything in between. Neither of them was the same person they had been the night a door was left open on the 52nd floor. And neither of them in that moment was alone. She was discharged on a Friday morning, and by Friday afternoon she was back at her desk. Ethan found out because Priya texted him they had exchanged numbers at the hospital, a practical arrangement that had somehow become its own quiet acknowledgement that Ethan Cole occupied a category in Celeste Vaughn's life that didn't have an existing label. The text said simply, "She's home." She lasted 4 hours before opening her laptop. Thought you'd want to know. Ethan read it on his lunch break, sitting in the building's basement break room with a sandwich Maya had helped him make that morning, peanut butter and banana. Her current conviction about the ideal lunch applied to him without his input. He texted back, "Thanks for telling me." Then he ate the sandwich and thought about a woman who had been on oxygen 2 days ago and was now running a company from her kitchen island. And he felt 2 things simultaneously. Exasperation and something that was uncomfortably close to admiration. He was learning that with Celeste Vaughn, those 2 feelings were almost always the same feeling. Thursday night when he arrived on the 52nd floor, the penthouse door was closed, and there was a sticky note on it at eye level, precise handwriting in black ink. "Come in when you get here. Doors unlocked. See." He stood in the hallway and looked at that note for a moment. In 8 months, she had never left him a note. In 8 months, the dynamic had been clear and unspoken. He was staff, she was the client, the penthouse was her world, and he moved through it invisibly. A sticky note with her initial on it was not a large thing. It was also he understood everything. He went in. She was at the kitchen island, where else with her laptop and 3 separate notebooks open, and a cup of something that smelled like green tea, which was new. The espresso machine that had been a permanent fixture of the counter was pushed to the far corner, which was also new. Small changes, the kind that take more effort than they look like. "You're not supposed to be working this hard this soon," he said, setting down his supplies. "Good evening to you too," she said without looking up. "I'm serious, Celeste." "I know you are. I'm choosing to address it by ignoring it." She turned a page in one of the notebooks. "The cessation program called today. The intake appointment is Monday." He stopped. "That was fast." "I called them Tuesday from the hospital. Priya set up the rest." She finally looked up. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want—" She paused, searching for the word. "I didn't want it to be about you being right. I needed it to be about me deciding." Ethan nodded. "That's exactly right," he said. Something flickered in her face. Surprise? maybe that he understood the distinction, without needing it, explained. "You're not going to say you told me so?" "I don't do that," he said. "My daughter doesn't respond well to it, so I trained it out of myself years ago." She almost smiled. "You train yourself based on what works with a 9-year-old. "Best teacher I've ever had," he said simply and picked up his cleaning supplies. He was halfway across the room when she said, "Sanjay knows." He turned. "Your chief of staff. I told him Thursday morning, before I was discharged." She closed one of the notebooks. Her hands were still on the cover. "He didn't react the way I expected." "How did you expect him to react?" "I expected him to start calculating. Succession planning disclosure requirements, investor optics." She looked at her hands. "He cried." The word landed quietly. "He said he'd known something was wrong for over a year," she continued. "He said he'd been too afraid to ask because the last person who pushed back on me about something personal was escorted from a board meeting." A pause. "He wasn't wrong. I did that." "What did you say?" "I said I was sorry." She looked up. "I'm not good at that." Sanjay looked like I'd handed him something he'd been waiting years for. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. She pressed them flat against the notebook cover. "Is that what I've been doing, to everyone around me? Making myself so untouchable that the people who would have helped me were too afraid to try?" Ethan set down his supplies again. He came back to the island and leaned against the opposite counter. "Probably," he said, "but that's not who you're going to be going forward. You don't know that." "No, but you do." She looked at him. Then she picked up her green tea and drank, and was quiet for a moment, and Ethan let the quiet be what it was, not a problem to solve, just a space for something to settle. "The pulmonologist gave me a number," she said. "A progression timeline. If I stop smoking completely, maintain the medication regimen, do the pulmonary rehab, I can potentially stabilize where I am, not reverse it. You can't reverse COPD." She said that part with a particular flatness, like she was pressing it down into herself, making it fit. "But stabilize. Keep stage 2 from becoming stage 3 for possibly a long time. Possibly a very long time if I'm consistent." "That's good news," Ethan said. He also told me that consistency is the hardest part, that most people manage it for 6 months and then have a bad week and slide. She set the cup down. He said the people who succeed long-term almost always have what he called an accountability structure. Someone in their life who knows the full picture and checks in. She looked at Ethan with the directness that had stopped startling him weeks ago and started feeling instead like being trusted. "I don't have that person." The statement sat there, clean, unadorned. "The cessation program will give you a counselor," he said carefully. "Yes." "And Sanjay knows now." "Yes." "That's a start." "Ethan." She said his name in the voice that meant she was about to say the real thing, and she needed him to hear it without deflecting. "I'm asking if you'd be willing to keep doing what you've already been doing. Not because you work in this building, because—" She stopped, tried again. "Because you're the only person in my life who looked at me when I was on the floor and didn't look away." The room was very still. Ethan thought about accountability structures and job descriptions, and the fact that he was a night janitor and she was a billionaire, CEO, and how none of that had been relevant for weeks now. How it had maybe never been as relevant as it looked from the outside. He thought about Maya's voice saying the winning happened when it happened. He thought about Diana pressing her hand against her sternum, and how he would give anything, everything to go back to a moment before it was too late. "Yes?" he said. "I'll keep showing up." She nodded once, quickly, like she didn't want to give herself time to make it awkward. "Good. That's good." She opened her laptop again. "Now please clean something. You standing there like that is making me feel like I should give a speech." He laughed, a real one, the kind that surprises you. He picked up his supplies and went to work. The Monday intake appointment was the first test, and she passed it the way Celeste Vaughn passed everything, with aggressive preparation and a refusal to appear uncertain. She texted Ethan that evening, Done. They assigned me a counselor. Her name is Dr. Reyes. She didn't seem intimidated by me, which is either a good sign or a bad one. He texted back, definitely a good sign. 3 dots. Then she asked me to identify my primary smoking trigger. I said stress. She said that's what everyone says and asked me to be more specific. I told her it was the moment between deciding something and finding out if I was right. She wrote that down for a very long time. Ethan read that and sat with it for a moment, because it was one of the most honest things he had ever heard anyone say about themselves, the particular vulnerability of someone who needs to be right and is terrified of the interval before they know. He typed, "That took courage to say." The response came back fast. It took Dr. Reyes 20 minutes of very uncomfortable silence. Same thing. The second test came 11 days later, and it wasn't a cigarette. Ethan arrived at the building on a Tuesday night, and the lobby security guard Marcus, a big quiet man who always nodded at Ethan with the solidarity of someone else working nights, stopped him at the desk with an expression that was carefully not an expression. "There's something going on upstairs," Marcus said. "Ms. Vaughn had visitors this evening. Board members, 3 of them." He glanced at the elevator. "They left about an hour ago. She called down twice asking if her cleaning staff had arrived." His eyes held Ethan's for a moment. "I think she was asking about you specifically." Ethan took the elevator up. She met him at the door before he knocked. She was in a blazer over a t-shirt, half-armored, the way she got when something had required her to be professional, and she hadn't fully come down from it yet. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was angry and processing it as problem-solving. "3 board members," she said before he could speak. "Richard Hale, our chairman, and 2 others. They came to do what they called a wellness check." The air quotes were precise and furious. "Someone told them about the hospital." Ethan went still. "Who? That's the question, isn't it?" She turned and walked back into the penthouse, and he followed, setting his supplies inside the door. "It wasn't Sanjay. I know that the way I know anything I read people, and Sanjay's loyalty is the one currency he never negotiates with." She stopped at the kitchen island. "It wasn't Priya. She's been with me 6 years and she protects my information the way some people protect religion." She looked at him. "The hospital. Someone at the hospital. A staff member. A resident, probably. Young recognizes me, thinks it's not that serious to mention it to a friend. The friend mentions it to someone who mentions it to someone on the board." She pressed her palms flat on the counter, a gesture he recognized now as her way of grounding herself when she wanted to pick something up and throw it. "Richard sat in my living room and told me that the board was concerned, that they felt given my health situation it might be appropriate to discuss contingency planning." The last 2 words landed like a verdict. "What did you say?" Ethan asked. "I told him that I had a chronic condition that was being actively managed by a specialist, that my cognitive function was completely unimpaired, that Vertex had its best quarter in 3 years under my leadership. Last quarter, and that if the board wanted to discuss contingency planning, they were welcome to put it on the agenda for the next official meeting where I would be present to respond to it." She picked up her tea, then put it back down. "And then I showed them out." "Good?" Ethan said. "It's not good." Her voice cracked slightly, just at the edge, just enough. "Ethan, this is what I was afraid of. This exact thing. The moment the health situation becomes something the board can point to, it becomes a lever. It becomes permission to question everything. Every decision, every risk I take, every strategy that doesn't immediately pay off. They'll say it's the disease affecting my judgment." She stopped. "It doesn't matter that it's not true. It matters that they have the narrative now." Ethan looked at her. She was standing with both hands on the counter and her jaw tight and her eyes slightly too bright. Not crying. Celeste didn't cry in front of him. That was apparently a line she held, but close to something. Close to the specific exhaustion of someone who has been strong in the wrong direction for too long. "Sit down," he said. "I don't need to. Celeste, sit down." She sat. On the bar stool at the island, and for a moment she just sat there with her hands in her lap and her shoulders dropped from where she'd been holding them for hours, and she looked for just a moment like a person instead of a CEO. "Richard Hale," Ethan said, leaning against the opposite counter. "Is he someone who would actually move against you, or is he someone who wants you to think he might, so you'll manage him proactively?" She blinked. "That's—" She stopped. Considered it. "The latter. Probably the latter. Richard doesn't have the coalition to move against me, even if he wanted to. He was performing concern to establish a position. So what actually happened tonight is that he showed you his hand." A pause. "Yes. And now you know exactly where the threat is before it becomes a real threat." She looked at him. The brightness in her eyes changed character, not emotion anymore, but the particular sharp focus of a mind that has just found its footing. "You think like an operator," she said. "I think like someone who's been reading situations he can't afford to misread for a long time," he said. "Different context, same skill." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know what the worst part is? It's not Richard. It's that he's not entirely wrong." She said it with the specific courage of someone who has decided that honesty is less painful than pretending. "I have been impaired. Not cognitively, but in terms of energy focus, the ability to sustain the pace I was sustaining." She looked at her hands. "I've been running this company at 70% for over a year and pretending it was 100. And now," Ethan said. She looked up. "Now I'm at 60 maybe. Coming off the exacerbation, the new medication adjustments. The cessation program taking up mental bandwidth." She stopped. "But the trajectory is different. For the first time in 2 years, the trajectory is up instead of down." She said it like she was testing whether she believed it. Then more firmly, "The trajectory is up." "Yes," Ethan said. "It is." She held his gaze. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say one word and make it feel like evidence." "You provide the evidence," he said. "I just confirm it." She shook her head, the gesture she made when she didn't have a response and didn't want to admit it. Then she picked up her tea and this time actually drank it, and her shoulders settled another fraction toward human. "Maya," she said. "How is she?" The subject shift was deliberate. He knew it. She knew he knew it, but he followed it anyway, because sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is let them change the subject. "She's decided she wants to be an engineer," he said. "This week. Last week it was a marine biologist. The week before a judge." "An engineer," Celeste repeated. Something warm moved across her face. "What kind?" she said, and I'm quoting, "the kind that builds things people actually need, not just things that look impressive." He paused. "I don't know where she got that distinction. It was disturbingly sophisticated for someone who still needs help with long division." Celeste was quiet for a moment. "She got it from you," she said. "That's your distinction. You make it every day between what looks impressive and what people actually need." She looked at him. "You've been making it since the night you walked through my door." The statement settled in the room. Ethan looked at her, this woman who had been on the floor of her kitchen and in a hospital bed and in a board meeting and on a balcony in the dark, and who was sitting now at her kitchen island with her hands wrapped around a cup of green tea, learning slowly and with great difficulty the difference between surviving and living. "I have floors to clean," he said quietly. "Yes," she said. "You do." He worked in the comfortable quiet that had become over these weeks their version of normal. She went back to her notebooks. He moved through the penthouse with the steady rhythm of someone who has made peace with the work his hands do, who has understood maybe only recently that the work your hands do and the work your heart does are sometimes the same work. He was almost finished when she spoke again without looking up from her notebook. "The cessation counselor asked me to identify one concrete thing in my life that I'm doing this for. One specific thing, not a concept." She turned a page. "She said the company or my health aren't specific enough. She said it needs to be something you can picture." Ethan waited. "I told her I'm doing it so I can see what kind of engineer a 9-year-old girl becomes." She said it to the notebook. Not to him. like she needed the buffer of not quite looking at him when she said something real. I said I'd only met her once, which isn't true. I haven't met her at all. But I feel like I know her. A pause. Is that strange? Ethan stood very still. No, he said. That's not strange at all. She nodded, still not looking at him. Good. He finished the floor. He packed his supplies. He walked to the door. Ethan. Her voice stopped him the way it always did. Tell her. She stopped. Never mind. She doesn't know who I am. She knows about you, he said. Not by name, but she knows there's a woman in the building where her dad works who is figuring out how to be brave. He looked back over his shoulder. She said that sounded like a good story. Celeste finally looked up. For just a moment, just one something completely unguarded moved across her face. Not the almost laugh, not the managed emotion, not the boardroom composure. Something simple. Something that looked, Ethan thought, a great deal like hope. Good night, Ethan, she said. Good night, he said. He took the elevator down through 52 floors of silence, and when he stepped out into the cold New York night and started the walk to the subway, he thought about trajectories, how they look the same, going up as going down, until you find the moment where one becomes the other, and how sometimes you have to be very close to someone before you can see which direction they're actually moving. He thought Celeste Vaughn was moving up. He had been right about harder things. He was willing to bet on this one. 6 weeks after the hospital, Celeste Vaughn stood in front of her board of directors and told them the truth. Not the managed version. Not the strategically disclosed version designed to minimize liability and control the narrative. The actual truth, COPD. Stage 2, 14 months of self-managed denial, a collapse in her own lobby, and a treatment plan that was, as of that morning, showing measurable results. Ethan found out about it the way he found out about most things in her life now from Priya, who texted him at 2:30 in the afternoon while he was between shifts. She told the full board today. No spin, just the truth. Richard Hale's face looked like he'd swallowed something sideways. Thought you'd want to know. He read that text 3 times. Then he sat in the break room with his cold coffee and thought about a woman who had once told him that the moment she admitted weakness, everything would change, and how she had been right, and how the thing that changed had not been what she feared. He texted Priya back. How did she seem afterward? The response took 4 minutes, like someone who put something down that was very heavy. You know that look? That's what she looked like. He knew that look. He had been watching for it for weeks. Thursday night, she was waiting for him at the kitchen island with 2 cups of green tea, one for her, one set precisely at the stool across from her, which was the closest Celeste Vaughn had ever come to asking him to stay. He sat without being told. The board meeting, he said. The board meeting, she confirmed. She wrapped both hands around her cup. Richard asked if my condition affected my decision-making capacity. I told him that my decision-making capacity was demonstrably stronger now than it had been during the 14 months I was managing an undiagnosed progressive disease while pretending to be invincible. She paused. He didn't have a follow-up question. Good answer, Ethan said. It's the truth. That's what made it a good answer. She looked at the cup. 2 other board members, ones I wouldn't have predicted, spoke up after Richard. Said they supported full disclosure and respected that I'd come forward. She was quiet for a moment. I've worked with these people for 6 years. I didn't know they were the kind of people who would say that. You didn't give them the chance to be, Ethan said. She looked up. Not defensively, she was past that mostly. Just honestly. No, I didn't. She drank. Dr. Reyes said something in our last session. She said that when we make ourselves untouchable, we also make ourselves unknowable, and that we can't actually be supported by people who don't know us. She set the cup down. I thought I was protecting myself. I was actually just alone. The word sat there. Alone. She said it without drama, the way you say a word when you finally looked at it straight on, and it's lost some of its power. "You're not now," Ethan said. "No," she said. "I'm not now." A beat of quiet. Then she reached behind her to the counter and picked up a folder and slid it across to him. He looked at it without opening it. "What is this?" "Open it," she said. He opened it. It took him a moment to understand what he was looking at. Then it took him another moment to make sure he was reading it correctly, and then he looked up at her. "Celeste, it's a scholarship," she said. "Full ride. Engineering program any university Maya qualifies for when she's ready. Housing materials, everything." She met his eyes. "The Vertex Foundation has an education initiative. I restructured part of the funding allocation last week. This is real. It's legal. It's not charity. It's a foundation grant that gets awarded on merit. And the criteria are set by the selection committee, not by me." She paused. "But I made sure the criteria included students who demonstrate, and I'm quoting the document, exceptional analytical thinking, and a commitment to building things people actually need." Ethan stared at her. "She doesn't know about it yet." Celeste continued. "She shouldn't know about it yet. She's 9. It would just be confusing. But when she's ready, when she applies, it's there." A pause. "I know you said you didn't want anything from me. This isn't for you. It's for her. And it's not payment for what you did. You can't pay for what you did. This is just—" She stopped, and for the first time in weeks, she struggled for the word. Celeste Vaughn, who always had the word. "This is me doing the only concrete thing I can think of to match the weight of what someone gave me." Ethan looked at the folder in his hands. He thought about Diana, about the box he had opened, and the photograph he had kept, and the trophy on the kitchen counter that Maya had touched every morning since show and tell, like it was a talisman. He thought about his daughter, who wanted to build things people needed, who had a mind that startled him regularly, who deserved every door that could possibly be opened. His throat was tight. He didn't try to pretend it wasn't. "Thank you," he said. Just that. No deflection, no protest, no reaching for the version of himself that didn't need things. Just the two words said directly the way she had taught him, without apology, without armor. She nodded once. "You're welcome," she said. And that was it. Clean. Human. Enough. He closed the folder. She picked up her tea, and they sat in the quiet that had become over these months the most honest space either of them occupied. The cessation program hit its first real wall at week 7. Ethan knew before she told him, because he had started reading her silences the way he had once learned to read Diana's, not with dread anymore, but with attention. When she met him at the door, instead of calling him in, something was wrong. When she was at the island, but not working, something was very wrong. That Thursday, she was at the island, and her notebooks were open, but none of the pages had writing on them, and her tea was cold, and she was staring at the wall across the kitchen with the look of someone who has been fighting something for hours and is very tired. "Talk to me," he said. "I almost smoked today." She said it the way people confess things they're ashamed of, fast, flat, without inflection, like speed could reduce the impact. "I had a 7-hour negotiation with a partner company that fell apart in the last hour. I walked out of the building. I got to the corner. There's a bodega there. I stood outside it for 4 minutes. 4 minutes? Ethan said. I counted. Dr. Reyes said to count when I feel the urge. Notice the time passing. Remind myself it's a wave and waves crest and break. She looked at her cold tea. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Then I walked back in. Ethan was quiet for a moment. You didn't smoke. I almost did. Almost isn't the same thing. It felt the same. Celeste. He waited until she looked at him. Week 7 is when most people fall. The program told you that. Dr. Reyes told you that. The fact that you're sitting here telling me about 4 minutes instead of calling me from a balcony with a cigarette that's not almost failing, that's succeeding in the hardest possible way. She looked at him for a long moment. Why do you always do that? Do what? Take the thing I think is evidence of failure and show me the other side of it. Her voice was unsteady at the edges. I've had consultants, advisors, coaches, people I paid serious money to be in my corner. None of them did what you do. They were trying to fix you, Ethan said. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm just standing here while you fix yourself. She pressed her lips together, held it. I don't know how to thank you for that, she said finally. I've been trying to figure out the right thing to say for weeks, and I don't have it. You don't need to say anything, he said. You stood outside a bodega for 4 minutes and 11 seconds and you walked back in. That's the thank you. That's all of it. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When she opened them, she picked up the cold tea and drank it anyway, and the look on her face when she tasted how cold it was made him laugh, and her expression shifted in response, startled into something lighter. Something that had been waiting underneath the weight of the day for somewhere to go. That's terrible, she said. I'll make you a fresh cup, he said and stood up. You don't have to, Celeste. He filled the kettle. Let someone make you tea. She was quiet for a moment, then very quietly, all right. The twist that neither of them saw coming arrived on a Tuesday in the form of Maya. It wasn't planned. Ethan's mother had called at 9 that night, a migraine sudden, the kind that meant she couldn't watch Maya until morning, and his options were limited, and his supervisor owed him nothing, and his shift was mandatory. And so Maya arrived at the building at 10:45 p.m. in her pajamas, and her puffy coat, carrying her backpack, and the particular dignity of a child who has decided to take a situation seriously. She can wait in the lobby, Marcus offered, and Ethan was trying to make that work in his head when his phone buzzed. A text from Celeste Priya told me you had a situation. Bring her up. He stared at the text. Typed, That's not necessary. Immediate response. I know it's not necessary. Bring her up. He looked down at Maya, who was looking up at him with the patient expression of someone who had already decided what was going to happen. Are we going upstairs? She asked. How did you know? He said. Dad. She said it with the gentle condescension of the very young toward the merely adult. Let's go. Celeste opened the penthouse door before they knocked. Maya looked up at her with the frank total assessment that only children and certain CEOs deploy without self-consciousness. Celeste looked down at Maya with an expression Ethan had never seen on her face before, not the boardroom face, not the 2 a.m. face, not the carefully managed public face. Something open, something almost uncertain, like she was meeting someone important and wanted to get it right. You're the lady my dad helps, Maya said. Celeste glanced at Ethan. He gave her nothing. This was her territory now, her navigation. I am, Celeste said. Your dad is very good at helping people. I know, Maya said with the serenity of established fact. He's good at a lot of things. He just doesn't always talk about them. She looked past Celeste into the penthouse. Your apartment is very shiny. It is. Celeste agreed. Do you want to come in? Maya looked at her father. He nodded. She walked in like she owned the place, and Celeste stepped aside to let her, and the look on Celeste's face in that moment watching a 9-year-old in pajamas walk into her $4 billion penthouse like it was perfectly natural was something Ethan knew he would carry for the rest of his life. Maya settled at the kitchen island. She opened her backpack and produced her homework long division, which she was working through with grudging focus, and Celeste made hot chocolate without being asked, sliding it across the counter, with the precision of someone who has watched Ethan make tea often enough to understand that making things for people is its own language. Maya looked at the hot chocolate, then at Celeste. Are you sick? She asked. Ethan started to speak. Celeste held up one hand slightly, and he stopped. Celeste said. I'm getting better. My mom was sick, Maya said. She said it the way she said most things directly without cruelty, because she was 9, and she had grown up in a house where truth was the default currency. She didn't get better. I know. Celeste said quietly. Your dad told me. Dad, he doesn't talk about her that much, but when he does, you can tell she was really good. Maya looked at her long division. He's better now, though. He's not sad the same way anymore. She looked up. I think helping you helped him. The room was completely still. Ethan felt something move through him. Something he couldn't have named precisely. Some combination of grief and gratitude and the particular ache of being seen clearly by someone who loves you without agenda. His daughter. 9 years old, doing long division at a billionaire's kitchen island at 11 at night, telling the truth because she didn't know any other way. Celeste looked at him over Maya's head. Her eyes were very bright. I think you're right, she said to Maya. I think it helped both of us. Maya nodded satisfied and returned to her long division. 3 months after that night, Celeste Vaughn gave an interview to a technology publication. Not a puff piece, not a carefully managed profile, but a real conversation about leadership and vulnerability and what it means to build something sustainable. She talked about COPD. She used the word chronic. She said that her greatest professional failure had been conflating her own invincibility with the company's strength, and that she had learned slowly and with difficulty that the two things had nothing to do with each other. The interviewer asked her if there was a turning point. She said yes. The interviewer asked what it was. She said, someone heard me through a closed door and didn't walk away. The interviewer assumed she was speaking metaphorically. She let them assume that. Ethan read the interview on his phone on a Thursday morning before his shift. Maya was eating cereal across from him, currently interested in marine biology. Again, the engineering phase having given way, though he suspected it would return, and she looked up and said, What are you reading? An article about someone I know, he said. Is it good? He looked at the screen. At the words, someone heard me through a closed door and didn't walk away. He thought about a door left open on the 52nd floor, and a cough that sounded like something tearing, and a woman on a white marble floor with her hand against her chest, and terror in her eyes before the mask came down. He thought about a sticky note in precise black ink, a text from Chicago at 2:47 a.m., a folder with a scholarship inside it. Hot chocolate slid across a counter by hands that were learning slowly how to give without calculation. He thought about Diana, about how love doesn't always look like romance, how it looks just as often like someone who stays in a doorway when every practical reason says to walk away. How it looks like the truth told carefully, and patience that doesn't announce itself, and showing up on a Thursday night with nothing to offer but presence. He thought about his daughter, who would one day apply to universities and not know why one of the doors opened so easily and how that was exactly right. Some things work best when they're quiet. Yeah, he said to Maya. It's a good one. She went back to her cereal. He pocketed his phone. Outside, the city was doing what cities do, endless, indifferent, full of people brushing past each other in hallways and elevators and lobbies. Most of them never knowing which encounter is the one that changes everything. Ethan Cole knew. He had been the janitor in the hallway, and he had heard a sound through a door, and he had made a choice that had nothing to do with his job description, and everything to do with who he was. A man shaped by loss into someone who could not watch another person wait too long. He had not saved Celeste Vaughn. She had saved herself one hard choice at a time. One counted minute outside a bodega. One honest sentence in a boardroom. One cup of tea made for a child in pajamas at midnight. What he had done was stay close enough for the saving to be possible. And that he had learned from Diana, from Maya, from a 52-floor building and a door left open and all the strange geometry of lives that intersect without planning, that was not a small thing. That was in fact everything.